Yay, thank you, Mario. I'm really excited to be here. It's been really cool meeting everybody, and like I haven't been to a Maker Faire in a really long time, and it just reminded me of like how much I love it and how much I appreciate y'all and everything that y'all do. Because like you're curious and you solve problems and you have fun, and it brings me so much joy and gives me a lot of hope. And so when I was chatting with Mario about like, I was like, what do I talk about? Like, what's your community like? What do they want to learn? What are they about? He was like, well, you do stuff with AI, and like that's kind of new. Like, talk about that. And I was like, all right, I'll pull something together. And so I kind of wanted to wrap that around like this concept of like building better systems and using AI as a tool in like our bag of tricks. So here's my little narrative structure. So I'm going to kind of talk about like who I am and why I'm here. And then we'll talk about kind of like the present in terms of the projects that I built in the last couple of years with AI, some of the lessons that I've learned, and some of the tools that you can use to build your own projects with AI. We'll do a little fun project demo that Jonathan was kind of like, hey, like, can we do translation with AI? And like, heck yes, we can. And then I'll talk about the future, like kind of how, like what is my ideal vision of the future? What is my North Star that I'm working towards? And what are some of the projects that I have in my works? And I'm like, maybe if I speak them out loud, I have to finish them. And I'll end with some resources, then we can do some Q&A. Yay. Also, this is casual, so like I put slides and stuff. So please feel free to interrupt, like just like raise your hand if you have a question and we can like have a conversation as we go. All right, cool. So yay, hello. As Mario said, my name is Jen Fox. I go by the online handle Jen Foxbot, partly because my name is super common and partly because it's cool and fun and I like it. But before I kind of start with like the human stats or whatever, I just wanted to like, I'm a squishy human like everybody. I'm really curious. I'm silly. I like to play and have fun. And my main motivation is like I've made decisions in my life is to just like try to make the world a little bit better. I was in Girl Scouts and I really liked their motto of like leave the earth better than you found it. I was like, heck yeah, I love that. Let's do it. So I've had this like circuitous route in science and tech and art and everything like that. When I discovered physics in high school, I was like, yes, this is amazing. I kind of joke that physics is my religion because it is the way that I like to find answers to the really like big questions that we have, like what is life? Why am I different than this table or whatever? And physics was a way for me to like find answers to that. I was on track to be a cosmologist, which is like studying the makeup of the universe. So like what is the universe made out of? I worked in a dark matter lab for a number of years, which was super cool, but like most physicists, I worked in a basement by myself. And in the summer before my senior year, the BP oil spill happened. And I was really obsessed with it. I got to work about an hour before the professors did. And instead of starting the experiment like I was supposed to, a lot of days I would just obsessively research climate change, or we called it global warming back in the day. And I was just like super distraught, really worried, like we aren't talking about this. Scientists are talking about the tipping point being in 2012. And I was like, oh, it's 2 years from now. And I had a really hard conversation with myself because to do anything in physics, to get a job in physics, you have to go get a PhD, which takes like 8 to 10 years if you're doing experimental physics. And that's a really long time. I really, really respect everybody that does research, and I am still really obsessed with it and excited that I get to learn from them. But I realized that I really, really cared about environmental and social justice, and I wanted to try to make change on that front. So I switched to engineering, and I kind of like dabbled in a lot of different things. I discovered making, and I ultimately founded a company in 2014, Foxbot Industries. And as I was trying to like solve this small problem of climate change, I have that problem where I'm like, I'll just tackle these little problems like climate change or the educational system. I realized that the problem wasn't technology. Like we have the technology to deal with, to reduce emissions and to build better systems. But the problem, was an implementation problem, which is people. And people are really complicated and squishy, right? And so I ended up moving into education because I wanted to teach people how to use technology as a tool to solve the things that they care about, to make it more accessible and to show that, like, yeah, actually, like, we can make a difference as individuals. We just have to, like, figure out where we want to plug in and plug in. So I ended up doing a lot of, like, project-based tutorials, worked a lot with SparkFun and Adafruit, and they're delightful. And then as I went, I started teaching a lot of workshops and building curriculum, and I realized that, like, curriculum was really great because it helped me scale. So, like, I could teach a workshop to, like, 40 or 50 people, but if I wanted to reach thousands, I could build a curriculum and give it to teachers and then have them teach that. And so that's what I ended up doing with my business for a number of years. There's also a really good question yesterday about, like, how do you survive as a maker? And curriculum was also a really good way to survive and do the things that I love while also making sure that I could survive and pay rent and take care of myself and my dog and all of that good stuff. So it was really a win-win. And in 2020, this is right before the pandemic, actually. It's like not that kind of 2020 yet. But my friend sent me a job description and he was like, yo, I think this is what you're trying to do with your business, but with the resources of a large company. I was a little skeptical, but I interviewed. I really liked the people that I talked to. They were honest about, Microsoft has engaged a lot with the maker community and made some mistakes, and they owned them, and they were like, that's why we want to bring you in, because you will be honest with us. Like, we want you to tell us what's working and what's not working, and we want to give you the opportunity to drive this. So I accepted the position, and I joined to help drive our external maker efforts. I'm really proud of the work that we did. We worked a lot with Adafruit and NomCon and a number of different organizations around the country, did some really cool stuff with them. And also, in fall of 2022, ChatGPT was released into the world, and that changed everything. So the org that I work in owns the relationship with OpenAI, and so at that point, it was like, okay, all hands on deck. And I had a conversation with, like, the folks that I worked with, and basically it was like, we need everybody to help with this. We still want you to, make sure that we maintain our relationships with the maker community and everything, and we want you, I'm kind of like the cool person in the org, and they were like, can you do projects, like, in your limited capacity, like, when you have time to, like, make AI cool and fun? And I was like, heck yeah. I had a conversation with myself, like, does this feel right? This wasn't exactly what I was hired to do, so does this still feel good? Am I still making the change that I want to? And the answer was yes. This is exactly where I need to be right now. It's exactly where I want to be. And so I'm really stoked to be helping drive Microsoft's AI strategy. So as part of that, I've built a number of projects with AI. So I'm going to talk about some of them and the lessons that I've learned. So number one, not every AI project needs a large language model. I'm lazy, so I'm going to use some acronyms. That's what an LLM is. ChatGPT, Mistral, Llama, Meta or Facebook's large language models, generative AI. Those are all LLMs. But there's a lot of different types of AI tooling, and the broader umbrella of AI is called machine learning. There's decades of research to build lots of different types of machine learning tools that aren't just generative AI. And when I say generative AI, what I really mean is AI that creates content. So it writes documents, it writes emails, it writes text, creates images, creates video, that type of stuff. That's what an LLM is. That's what generative AI is. They're kind of used interchangeably. So I'm going to cover a few different machine learning tools. The first one that I am so tickled by because it's really, really fun is computer vision. There's two types. The first is image recognition. So, like, you take a picture and you label of what the picture is. So let's say you take a picture of a forest and you would label that image forest, or like you have a cityscape and label it a city, or maybe you call it Miami or Seattle or whatever. And then the other type of computer vision is object detection. So that's when you take an image and you draw boxes around the objects in that image. So let's say you have a forest and you draw a box, you're like, this is a Douglas fir, or this is a vine maple, or this is a sword fern. So that's like identifying objects in the picture. The project that I did, and I'll get into this a little bit later, is a trash classifier. So I built a project with the Raspberry Pi computer where you take a picture of a piece of trash, and the machine learning model will label it as garbage, recycling, compost, or hazardous waste. So I spent like a month taking pictures of trash that I had in my house. I took like 700 pictures and labeled them by hand, and it was really time consuming. And machine learning models, or AI models in general, need a lot of data. So even though I had 700 photos, I still had to supplement it to improve the performance of my model. So I grabbed a data set from Kaggle, which is an open source data set website. And someone did a lot of work taking like thousands of pictures of trash and labeling them. So I was like, yes, amazing. Pulled that into my project, and then off we were. And it worked pretty well. I was actually pretty surprised and impressed. So yay, computer vision. The next machine learning tool, there's a lot of different speech tools outside of generative AI. So for example, there's speech to text and text to speech. So you can build projects like live captions. So I did this project in partnership with a contractor that I hired, and basically like you can run it on a Raspberry Pi, and you have any sort of video running and it'll print captions on your Raspberry Pi. So I really love that because it's an accessibility project, or like if you want to go to the bathroom and watch TikTok videos and they don't have captions, like you can run this on your Pi. And then the other one is text translation. So you can translate text documents, and in conjunction with speech to text, you could like grab some speech, convert it to text, and then translate it into whatever language you want. So I built a command line program where you could take a document and automatically translate it into like 135 different languages, and then it'll save the little file in your computer for you. And this was really helpful because like my friend who has a business, she was like, I really want to operate in other countries, but I don't have the capacity to hire people to translate. And so with a small business, like a machine learning model is totally sufficient. Like it's probably not gonna be perfect, but that's okay. And it makes it a lot easier to just reach more people around the world. The other two speech ML tools or machine learning tools are speech recognition, so recognizing like speakers' voices and things like that. And then text and photo extraction, so like submitting a document and pulling out key phrases. Like let's say I want to pull out all of the mentions of Miami Maker Faire, like go through all of the news articles and pull out all of the mentions of Miami Maker Faire, things like that. Okay, and then the last ML tool that I'm going to talk about is anomaly detection, and I'm really proud of this project. So this is a 2020 story. So one of my friends is a biomedical researcher, and in his lab, he stores his samples in these low temperature freezers, and he was really concerned that like without people in the lab, one of the freezers would fail, and he would lose hundreds of thousands of hours worth of work because all of his samples would thaw and then you have to trash them. And normally, like before the pandemic, there were a bunch of people in the lab who were keeping an eye on things, and like if the freezers would fail, which they had before, someone could like really quickly drag in a new one and transfer the samples or just like deal with it on the fly. But when there weren't people in the lab on a day-to-day basis, he was like, can you build me something to like help notify me if something's about to go south? And I was like, this sounds like a great opportunity to solve a problem and learn about machine learning. And so my friend and I at Microsoft, we built this project where we used a temperature sensor and we trained a machine learning model to detect if there was a change in the like freezing cycle. So kind of the way that freezers work is like, it's like air conditioning, right? You set a temperature, it turns on to like kind of keep to that temperature, and then it turns off. So you're not always, like let's say you set the temperature for 69 degrees, right? You're not always at that temperature. You're fluctuating kind of around it. Like the air conditioner is going to turn on, it might get a little bit colder, but then it'll warm up, it might get a little bit warmer, and then it kind of has this like oscillating, cyclical nature to it. And anomaly detection is a really, really cool machine learning algorithm that allows you to kind of track this standard kind of expected cycle And what it'll do is it'll flag if something different starts happening. And so anomaly detection is used for really critical systems to like tell you if something is gonna break before it breaks. It's really, really rad. So you can actually go and fix the problem before anything goes wrong. So yay, anomaly detection. So if you want to get started building with some of these machine learning tools, these are three kind of tools that I would recommend. So Edge Impulse is a really cool startup. They allow you to build custom AI and machine learning models, and they focus on hardware, so small devices like the ESP32 or the Raspberry Pi. It's not what I necessarily would call a small device, but I guess you could use the Pico. I also really like, I'm half wearing my Microsoft hat, mostly not, but I do honestly, like as a maker, I do really like Azure Cognitive Services, which is a Microsoft thing. It's one of my favorite Microsoft products actually, because it's really affordable. Like all of the projects that I've done have cost pennies. It's really user-friendly. The image classification stuff was really straightforward. Like you don't have to write any code. You just upload a photo, you type in what it is, and then it will like create the machine learning model for you. So I was like, yay, we did a cool thing and we made it affordable. And then the third one is Kaggle, which I mentioned. So that's a website where you can grab all different kinds of open source data sets. And all the data scientists will tell you that data collection and labeling is like one of the hardest aspects of AI and machine learning. It takes so long. So Kaggle is really, really useful. I don't know if you can read this, but these are, oh yeah, that's actually pretty good. Ignore this one because that's the OpenAI one. That's a generative AI tool, but all of the rest are different machine learning tools. Okay, cool. So this might seem obvious, but like now I'm going to get into the generative AI stuff. So like when you start playing with generative AI and start programming with it, it kind of feels like magic. And I wanted to build this puzzle game. And so I wrote a prompt to get the AI, basically like ChatGPT, the model that ChatGPT uses, which is called GPT-4. And I was like, all right, I want you to create a puzzle game for me, which is like a combination of a mystery hunt and an escape room. And I really like Adafruit's MagTag device, which is this thing right here. And because it has a bunch of input devices. So I was like, tight, like it's like Bop It, but a puzzle, right? So you can create a clue using the input devices. So the buttons on the screen or the sensors or whatever. And so I asked the AI, I was like, okay, like choose one of these 4 words and write a clue. And then I like wrote some simple game logic to like take the inputs and convert it to what one of those answers would be. And to start out, I just started with the 4 buttons on the bottom. Can you see the cursor as I do that? Okay, I think I gotta click this thing. Okay, nope, wait, laser pointer? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so these 4 buttons, I was like, oh, they have arrows on them. So like, we'll label them left, up, down, and right. And those will be our clues to start out with. And then later, okay, never, because you're a maker, you're like, oh, this is good enough, bye. But later you could like add sensors and turn it into this like really interactive game. But let's start simple. And the AI would give an answer using those 4 buttons like 9 times out of 10. And this was even after I was like, no, you must do this. This is so important. But like that 1 time out of 10, it would give me like the answer would be something like north, which is kind of like up, but not quite. Or maybe it would go totally off the rails and be like, the answer is winter, but then you can never win the game because none of the buttons are mapped to any of those words. And like, you have no way of guessing what the AI is gonna do. And so then I was like, wait, why am I letting the AI pick the answer? Like, this has been solved. This is like a simple dice roll, like a digital dice roll. And it was this funny moment because it seems really obvious in retrospect, but after playing with generative AI, I was like giving it way too much freedom and trying to force it to do things that it's not good at, which is like giving me a set or known answer. That's what programming is really, really good at. Like, you can program logic so that if this happens, then this happens. But with AI, if you say, if this happens, you might get something over here. It's what we call non-deterministic, or basically like you can't necessarily predict what's gonna happen. But that's okay, right? So that means like we don't have to use it to solve everything. We use it to solve the things that it's good at. So what is it good at? It's good at mimicking and emulating. So if, like, for example, with the puzzle game, I was like, give me a clue that is in the style of like a steampunk Renaissance fair, or give me a clue of a frozen wonderland. It's good at doing those types of things, but it's not very good at coming up with novel ideas. So if I just said, give me a clue, and that's it, it might give me something that's useful, but it probably won't. So you have to really kind of seed the AI, and that's why it's like the human is really, really important in this process, because we're the ones with the wild, like imaginative, creative ideas, right? And you can use AI as an assistant to kind of like sift through those ideas or help you with that process. Or like with the clues, I wrote a couple clues and then I was like, okay, help me write some other clues or something like that. And it is also really good at brainstorming. And so if you're like, I've used it for my parties. Like I had a Halloween party last year and I was like, give me some ideas for spooky Halloween foods. It was trained on the internet. And so like almost all of its lists are like lists of 10. And sometimes the ideas on that list of 10 are good and sometimes they're terrible. And so then you can kind of tweak your prompt and like, okay, well, give me some ideas that kids might like to eat, or give me some ideas that are easy to make. And it'll often like repeat itself, or like it'll kind of take some of the same ideas. Like it's like, I've seen this on Pinterest a bunch of times. But it is really helpful to kind of just give you some additional ideas of things that you might not have thought about. As I mentioned before, it's non-deterministic. So what it's not good at is if you have the same prompt and you ping ChatGPT or you ping the OpenAI API for like calling ChatGPT, it's not very good at being consistent. So even with the same prompt, you might get something different every single time. And that's really, really frustrating. And it kind of comes back to that puzzle game of like, where is it okay for it to do its own thing? Where is it okay for it to like kind of be creative? And where do you need to have like a known outcome? If you need a known outcome, like definitely don't use AI for that. It's also really, really good at summarizing. So sometimes when someone sends me a 10-page doc, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna read this. I feed it to ChatGPT. I'm like, what do I need to know from this document? And it's really cool because like Microsoft built this like work copilot, and so I can actually feed it a document, and it has access to my other documents, and I can be like, what do I need to know in the context of this other document? And so it'll pull out the relevant information for the things that I need to know. Love it. It saves me so much time. And then they're like, did you read the document? And I'm like, yeah, totally. I learned what I needed to, which is accurate. It's not very good at sticking to the script. So with the puzzle game, one of the things that was really funny was like, sometimes it would just like, I gave it a lot of different types of examples because I wanted clues around different themes. One of the clues happened to be winter, but other clues were like totally different. Like one was the steampunk example, one was like a fairy or something like that. And at one point, the AI kind of like cornered itself into a winter puzzle. So I played like 10 different rounds and every clue was winter themed. And it was really weird because it was like, this is not at all what I told you to do. You just like decided, I'm gonna put that in quotes because like, is it sentient? I don't think so. It like decided to make this like winter game. And so that was really strange. And some of my colleagues were like, oh yeah, I've seen this behavior before. Like you do X, Y, Z to kind of get out of that. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's a little annoying and frustrating. You have to like coerce it to really get it to do what you want it to do. And so kind of in summary, what I would say AI is good at is assisting. So like, that's why I really like the idea of a co-pilot. Like it's really good at helping you do the things that you want to do, but it's not so good at driving. Like you don't really want to let it run off and go do its own thing and then kind of come back and check on it. We are not yet at the point where you're like, yeah, go buy some tickets for me on Ticketmaster. Like it'll come back and it's like, I bought all the tickets for you on Ticketmaster. Like, oh, okay, we're gonna resell those because I don't need all of them. Okay. Ooh, yay, so we're getting to the demo. How am I doing on time? Okay. Yeah, sweet. I'm not paying attention to time. Okay, so AI gives us new ways of interacting with computers. And it's really interesting because a lot of the people in tech that I work with, they talk about like, they have always really wanted to like talk to the computer. And we're kind of there. You know, like there are some really interesting conversations that I like around like what does intelligence mean? What does consciousness mean? And I think that in the context of AI, and I think that those are really interesting and good conversations. I don't think they really apply yet. Well, I guess, again, it kind of, words are squishy. This is why math is really helpful sometimes, because it's like, this is a clear definition of we can box things. But ideas like consciousness and love and intelligence, like we can't really define those. They're squishy terms, right? So I'm glad that we're having those conversations. But I think that like, it's a really good time to think about like, how do we want to interact with computers? Like I was talking to Elijah yesterday because you have the pumpkin keyboard, which tickled me so much because I was like, yes, exactly. The keyboard is made up. The mouse is made up. The screen is made up. All of those things. The screen is an output device for us to see what is happening on the computer. The keyboard and the mice are input devices for us to tell the computer what we want it to do, right? Our bodies have input and output devices to interact with the physical world. Like, so we designed some for the computer so that we could like use our squishy bodies to interact with the computer. But they're made up, right? And we have a choice as to how we interact with computers going forward. And for me, like, I really hate that I just have to be stuck at a desk, especially after the pandemic. I'm really, really grateful that we have hybrid work, that like I can work from home some of the time and go into work some of the time, that I get to talk to my colleagues who are on the East Coast or wherever. And like video conferencing is amazing, but like, why do I have to be stuck at a screen? Why do I have to be stuck at a keyboard or a desk? Like, it's totally arbitrary. And with AI, we have the opportunity to just like create new ways of engaging with the computer. And like, this is where my Star Trek computer comes into play, because I love the fact that like on Star Trek, you can just like tap a thing and you're like, computer, call so-and-so, and the computer will connect you to whoever you want to talk to without you having to look at a screen or type anything. It leverages the natural ways of communicating that we already do. And same kind of thing with gesturing, right? Like, we can create computers that recognize gestures so that we can more naturally engage with these things that we have invented. So that enters FriendBot, and that's where I'm gonna, how do I get out of here? So, yay, demo time. So FriendBot is a project that I built to like be my little seed of like, this is our first, well, actually one of my friends like wrote most of the code. I was like, hey, what if we build this thing? So I've used FriendBot in a number of ways. It's pretty basic, but like the idea is that it's a way to talk to ChatGPT. So that's really what it's doing, is like, I'm just having a conversation with ChatGPT. And I've used it in a lot of different ways. I really like to break it out at parties. Like for Halloween, I made a spooky fortune teller, and I like dressed up my dress form, which is like a mannequin basically, and I like put a hat, and then I hid a Raspberry Pi and a speaker behind it, and I like, its prompt was like, give people spooky fortunes. And so people could go in and like get their fortune told. And so that was really fun. But something actually useful that I have used it for is as I'm trying to learn Spanish, going to South America, I was like, oh, I probably should learn Spanish because there's a lot of people in this world that speak Spanish, and it's a really beautiful language. So I've been learning for about a year on Duolingo, and Duolingo is cool because like I can learn words and stuff, but I'm really bad. Like, I am not conversational at all, and it's hard for me in Seattle to find people that speak Spanish. And so I was like, well, why don't I just make like a Spanish language tutor with FriendBot? So I did. Okay, so hey computer.
Hello.
Quiero practicar español.
Genial. Empecemos. Para decir hola, ¿cómo estás? En español, decimos hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien. Y si alguien te pregunta eso, puedes responder estoy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú, en español?
How do I order food politely? It's a really weird thing on Duolingo. Like, is this
In
actually how I
Spanish,
order food?
you can say me gustaría. Which means I would like. So, if you want an apple, you say me gustaría una manzana, por favor.
Me gustaría una manzana, por favor.
Perfecto. Eso es correcto. También puedes decir quisiera una manzana, por favor. Eso también significa I would like an apple, please.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Oh, that's really funny. Okay, yeah.
Where does the voice come from?
Ooh, that's a really great question. Okay, so this had, I don't know if you can tell, I picked an Argentinian accent because I went to Argentina and I was like tight. At first I tried, so there's a bunch of different languages. So for example, this is one that I picked. It kind of annoys me that like AI assistants, a lot of the ones that are like demure have like female voices, and a lot of the ones that are like, I'm an authority, like the sidewalk person is always like male-bodied voice, and it's like, again, arbitrary. So I was like, yeah, let's use a gender neutral one. So that's this one. But there are like 135 or more. There's 135-ish languages that are supported, and then there's like over 200 voices that are supported. Some of them are like what we would consider female. Some of them are what we would consider male. Some of them are neutral. And then there's different voices with different accents, which is really cool. When I first started the Spanish tutor, I used the English version. And just to give you a sense, so like, it's really funny because the way that it speaks Spanish like hurts me a little bit. Like it hurts my soul. Because it speaks Spanish in like a really just like brutal American accent. It speaks Spanish just fine, but it's like yo quiero taco, or I don't know, manzana, or like it speaks Spanish like you. Yeah, it's like very, very American English Spanish, which is like, that's not how I want to learn Spanish. So I gave it a Spanish voice. So that is a roundabout way of saying this is using cognitive services, and there's a bunch of different voices that you can choose from. So I'm just going to go to show you. And so whatever language you want to choose, you can pick from any of these. So like, let's say you want to go and learn Arabic, like you can choose Arabic voices. Or if you want to go to Japan and like build a translator on the go, you can, like, this also runs on a Raspberry Pi. So you can do that and you can have the voice in your ear. Yes.
Is this open source?
It is. It is open source. Yay. Good question. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm just staring at you. You're like, are you going to call me? You're just going to look at me. Like, yes. Yeah.
I noticed it was speaking to you in Spanish and then jumping between Spanish and English for that. That's just like a quirk of the AI, right? How would you stop that from happening?
So to stop that from happening, so part of it, that's a really good question. So a lot of that has to do with the prompt. So this is the prompt. My prompt is, you're a friendly, helpful, curious assistant who helps people practice Spanish, or help people learn Spanish. You use simple words like you're talking to a 5-year-old, because I'm probably at a 3-year-old level, but that's fine, I'm learning. Use brief sentences. So if you wanted to get rid of all like English, you could say, you are a translator who only speaks Japanese. And that is a great segue, because prompt engineering is like, I was like talking with some folks earlier, it's actually more of an art than a science, which has been really, really hard for a lot of engineers because it's a completely different way of thinking about engineering. And for folks that are like struggling, they feel a little nervous about being creative or imaginative. They're like, what do you mean I can't just do X and it gives me Y? Like I have to like, they have to kind of apply some sort of like artistic and scientific exploration to get to the right prompt. But to get the AI to really like do what you want it to do, you can use bold, or like it was trained on internet data, including code. So you can use code techniques to be like, this is really important. So kind of like the star for emphasis, which bolds things in Markdown. You can also use caps lock, so you can like yell at the AI, which is really funny. Like, you have to do this. Only speak Japanese. Do not speak English. You can also use hashes, which are headers in like HTML and Markdown and things like that. Yeah. Any other questions before I talk about the other prompt engineering stuff? Those are good questions. Rad. Okay, so my other tips, which you kind of saw from the prompt, like use short, concise sentences. If you have a really long prompt, it gets kind of confused. And so if you take that long paragraph or whatever and just break it up into sentences. Be as specific as you can. So like you saw, like you are a friendly, helpful, curious Spanish tutor. Very specific, right? And then it was more than just like speak in simple sentences. I was like, talk to me like I'm 5. There's a lot of Reddit data in there, so like it gets the ELI 5 thing. And then like, and play around with it too. Like if, like one of the things that I thought would be helpful, I said in a practice prompt, I was like, do you translate words when necessary? But that was a little vague for it. And so like as a human, we're like, oh yeah, when necessarily, like when I say, yo no entiendo, it would translate it. But instead of doing it when I asked, it would do it all the time. And so that's not really useful for conversational Spanish, right? Like I want to try to talk more in Spanish instead of having you translate at me every time you say something. So yeah, try different things. It is really helpful to give examples. So with the puzzle hunt, what I did is I said, you are a fun puzzle master, you make a fun puzzle game or whatever. And then I gave it examples of clues to you, like to kind of like seed it. We kind of call it seeding the AI for like, so I had the answer up top and then I wrote clue. And so like the answer it's like answer colon up. And then the clue was some sort of clue for the word up. So for example, the clue might be where airplanes go or something like that. And then you give it different examples so that kind of can get the gist of how to frame things. So let's say you want to use it in school to like practice for a test. And your teacher likes to give multiple choice tests, so you want to practice for multiple choice test. And so you say, okay, I'm taking a high school level biology class. I want to practice for my exam on amphibians. It's been a long time since I've taken biology, sorry. I don't know. It's the first thing that came to my mind. So you could give it an example of like what a multiple choice question looks like and some example answers, and then you could be like, okay, cool, give me some test questions and I'll check my answers. And finally, you can use generative AI to help you write prompts or rewrite prompts. So when I was making the puzzle game, I actually went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, here's an example clue, write me one for the word right. Because I was like, I don't know, or left. Like, that's kind of a hard one. Give me a clue for the word left. Some of them were terrible. It's not always going to give you good ideas, but that's what the human does, right? We're like, yeah, this one's good. I'm going to take that one. It can also help you rewrite prompts. So if your prompt really isn't doing what like you want the AI, isn't getting the AI to do what you want it to do, you can go and to ChatGPT or whatever and say, how do I like rewrite this prompt to get the AI to do what I want it to do? And you can explain what you want it to do, and it'll give you an example prompt, which is often better than what I come up with, which is a little spooky sometimes. But so we go. So, here we are. So it goes. Okay, cool. So I want to kind of end by just like this is kind of like the beginning of a technology that's going to totally reshape our culture, right? Just like smartphones did. Some people are like, it's more important than electricity. I'm like, we wouldn't have AI without electricity. So I get it, you're excited, and that's great, but like, let's put things in perspective. But totally, like it's changing the way that we do software engineering. Like I'm seeing that. And one of the things I'm really excited about is like it's gonna make software engineering or coding a lot more accessible, because now you don't have to like memorize a bunch of stuff. You can just be like, and this is really useful for me because I'm not a software engineer, and sometimes it can be like a few weeks between coding projects. I'm like, how do I do that one thing? Hey, GitHub Copilot, how do I write this function to do this thing? And it'll spit out a function that I can use, and if it doesn't work, I'm like, excuse me, it didn't work, I got this error. And it's like, oh, try these things. Like, cool. So I kind of want to frame where we are now as like an opportunity to use AI as a tool to build better systems. And I like this Buckminster Fuller quote because it reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend a while ago. Her name is Tiffany, and I love her dearly because she challenges me to be a better person. And we were having a conversation, and I made a comment about how like I really wanted to fix our systems. And she was like, Jen, the systems aren't broken. They're working as expected. And I was like, oh, that's fire. And she's totally right. And so I really like to frame it now, learning from her, in terms of like, how do we build better systems? Because often when we build better systems, they work better for everybody. And sidewalk cuts are a really good example, right? Like we made sidewalk cuts so that like the little ramps down for accessibility purposes for folks in wheelchairs or on crutches. And it turns out that it's actually way better for everybody. Like, so for folks that are older, have a hard time stepping off a curb, or like I messed up my knee at one point and I was having a hard time walking, and so I couldn't step off the curb. They're good for like parents with strollers or things like that. So accessibility, making things more accessible is better for everybody. So yay for better systems. I came across this concept of ecosystem thinking a couple of years ago, and I really have been trying to like chew on it and noodle it, and I really like the framing of it, of like recognizing that we don't exist in a vacuum, right? Like there are lots of other creatures around us. There are lots of other types of people around us. So when I build projects, I try to think about like, how do I engage with the world around me? How do I engage with the other people around me? One of the things I really liked about Jen's talk, and one of the things I love about the projects that she does, is that like she does them with community. And I'm really, really bad at that. Like that is one of the things I've been really trying to work on, is like I'm bad at asking for help. That's one of the areas that I have a hard time. I'm like, no, I can do everything myself. I'm fine. I'm self-sufficient. It's like, no, you don't need to be self-sufficient. And like none of us are self-sufficient. It's like ask for help, engage with your community. And like, I really like the idea that like ecosystems contain a lot of different things. And there's a lot that we can learn from and a lot that we can incorporate into our projects. I also needed to share this because I thought it was hilarious. I was asking ChatGPT about ecosystem thinking because I wanted to make sure that I was like defining it right. And it said, remember, while bananas might not directly fit into ecosystem thinking, understanding the broader context and connections can help us create a more resilient and adaptive world. I did not mention bananas at all. I was like, what? Where did ecosystems and bananas intersect? Like, I want to see that training data. So I was like, no idea where that banana curveball came from, but I'll take it. The rest of it's pretty great. And actually, the banana tickled me. So here we are. So basically, like, as I'm going forward, the trash classifier is a good example of an ecosystem project because my goal with it is like trying to get the right waste in the right bin, which is kind of laughable. Like Seattle added compost, and then there's other cities I've been to where it's like you separate all the plastic, and like it's kind of a running joke of like, where does it go? And jokes aside, like it is really frustrating and I want it to be easier. So I made the trash classifier to make it easier because the concept of it is great, right? Like materials are expensive, and eventually like I would like us to stop extracting materials, but also like we need things, and I get that. So like let's make it easier to reuse stuff. And so, like, I would love to see better ways of reusing materials so that they can get recycled and used in new things. So that's kind of the concept of the trash classifiers, like thinking about the ecosystem of materials that we are working with. And finally, the project that you can all hold me accountable towards is a crow project. So I'm building a project to train crows in my neighborhood to pick up trash in exchange for food. Yeah, because I love crows. They're hilarious. They're so smart. I'm just blown away by how clever they are. And when I listen to them, the number of ways that they communicate with each other boggles my mind, because every couple of months I hear something new and I'm like, oh my stars, that's a crow. I didn't know you can make that sound. So cool. Or like they can recognize faces. Like, be polite to the crows because they will remember your face. Yeah, for realsies. And so it's like, okay, these really smart creatures are around us all of the time, and like there's trash that doesn't get picked up on the street, and like I don't want to touch it with my hands. But like the crows kind of don't care, and if they get food, like I feel like it's a win-win, right? And so that's the idea of like using AI and image classification so that they can't game the system because they're gonna try. So to like take pictures of like, yes, this is trash, and like, no, that rock is not a trash. Come back later when you've done the work to find some trash, crow, and then I will give you a walnut. Or they steal it from somebody. I know, right? Like right out of your hand. They're like, excuse me, I need this chip bag. Mine now. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. So using AI to like work with crows and like learn more about them, and also kind of like bring them into our system rather than seeing them as like something that we don't want. Cool. And I'm going to kind of end by just mentioning like the Star Trek computer is my North Star, because it's really about connecting people. And like instead of centering the technology, and like I work in tech, and a lot of times people forget that like the idea of like building things is that we help people solve problems. And sometimes like I really appreciate that people are excited about the technology and like, yeah, like build something fun for the sake of building something fun and like useless, and that's wonderful, and we should absolutely do that. And also when we're building tech for other people, like what are the problems that they have? What are the things they're trying to do? Like let's focus on solving problems instead of just like building technology for the sake of building technology. And I've also found that stories are really powerful, and I love Star Trek because it is a hopeful vision of the future rather than like a lot of sci-fi, which is very dystopian. I'm like, all right, let's have a hopeful vision for our North Star. Here are some of my resources for like things that give me a hopeful vision of the future. Not all of it. I don't know. I was just like, what are the things very quickly. I would love to hear y'all's, so please send me. I'm always looking for good sci-fi. And then finally, if you're looking for resources, I publish all of the projects I've talked about are on my Hackster. They're all open source. Yeah, totally. They're all open source. I also would recommend, if you're trying to learn more fundamentals about AI, use MS Learn. Also the OpenAI API documentation is really, really wonderful. If you're looking for more advanced AI projects, there's there's like an open source project called AutoGen. It's on GitHub. If you want to use AI to do things like text you or send an email on your behalf, like that's where you should get started. Or not where you should, but where you could get started. I knew I had to put this in. I'm so bad at promoting myself. I also wrote a book. Yay, fun. I was like, I'm going to forget to mention it, and I totally forgot to mention it. Put it at the end in case you don't talk about it at all. And here we are. So if you are interested in electronics and you're not really sure where to get started, or you're like a little nervous about it, you're like, you're talking about AI, and this is really overwhelming, like, it's totally okay. The idea of this book is like, it'll walk you through, assuming you know nothing, to like building you up to understanding the fundamental building blocks of computers, which are called logic gates. And Adafruit made a little companion kit for it because they're amazing. So you can get the kit. It's project-based. It's really fun. My hand's on the cover. Yay, fun. Okay, cool. I don't know. I think I talked for a long time, but if you have any questions, this is Dolly, who turned me into Disney princess. Okay, thanks, Dolly. Yeah, anyway. Ta-da! Yes, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.